And I'm gonna be high.
Good on you, Donald. I'm the Rocket Man. Yeah.
I'm a rocket man. And I'm gonna be
Rocket Man. I'm a rocket man. I wanna go to the moon. You're out of Chicago. You started Levity. Why'd you start it? Let's go from there, and we'll just kind of start the conversation, and we'll go.
Sure, sounds good. So yeah, originally I started Levity with my co-founder because, back then we realized that AI holds a lot of potential for automation in businesses.
Yeah.
Back then, like it was 2019, 2020, back then there was way pre-ChatGPT hype, and AI back then was, generally working quite differently from today. You needed to bring a lot of training data, you needed to train your own models. It was way less accessible. But, what still holds true today is that, the average business, if it wants to make use of AI, not just for, hey, generate me 10 blog post ideas, or for kids doing their homework, but you actually want to use it in a repetitive process on a day-to-day
True.
basis. um, it's still not super easy for most companies to make use of it. And
No.
so what
You would think it is, but I try all the time, and it's hard.
exactly
Not very
exactly
accessible.
Exactly. And so, over time, what we've built is basically an automation platform that's built in a very opinionated way that makes use of AI at the core, but also, considers how do we get this into a real business process, so to say.
Nice.
And so over time, I had a bit of a background in the logistics space and industry. I was one of the early employees at Forto, the European flexport, if you will.
Hmm.
And so I had a bit of logistics context already, and we knew that there were tons of emails flying around in logistics. So that's what we naturally kind of moved for our go to market. And that's
Yep.
been a super good idea.
So I'm going to start with like the current events, and then we'll get into your story too, and why you started Levity and when. And I'll ask you probably questions about how you run the business, all those things. But right now, if you haven't heard of it, I'll be surprised. The DeepSeek, and it's the Chinese AI model of ChatGPT. It's as good as O1. I mean, Twitter's on fire, or X is on fire
Yep.
today. I did a little
Yep.
research of my own and like went through all of the differences, and I want to kind of get into it. But what's your first take? You can go as long as you want or a short answer on this. What's your first take of DeepSeek and how it's going to affect Levity?
I think it's going to be super good. It's going to be super good for everyone, unless you're one of the foundational model providers that are scrambling right now and figuring out like, oh, why didn't we do it that way? Or
Yeah.
also for Nvidia, like I think they're down 20% today. That's
Yeah, I just bought the dip. I'm pretty bullish that it's actually going to be a little different story there. But yeah, Nvidia's people are
yeah.
panic selling that.
Yeah. I think that's not a good decision to panic sell that right now. I think in the long run, it's also going to be good for Nvidia. Like my overall take is, whatever brings down the cost of AI is good for everyone involved. Um, and I think it will not even be bad for like a company like Nvidia, because in the end, what it does is it makes use cases economical that were previously uneconomical, so to
Yeah.
say.
Their
So
TAM increases, I think, because it was only the big players that were paying for the chips, and now everybody can say, "Hey, that might actually make sense."
yeah, and if you think about, for example, use cases like, you have like PDFs that are like multiple hundreds of pages with like lots of text in them, and what you wanted to do, let's say, is like figure out some data points that are somewhere like buried in all this text, and it's like a really long form document. Previously, if you wanted to process that with AI, that might have cost like several dollars, every single time
Because
you
you're
do
hitting
that.
the API over and over.
Yeah, because like sometimes depending on how you process it, you might have to even like apply some, for example, OCR techniques, extract the text from each page, then run the whole text through the models. And the more complex the computing task gets, the more expensive it gets, right? Especially
Mhm.
if you're running a model like GPT 4.0, that's quite expensive compared to like a DeepSeek, for example, now. And so I think
Yeah.
from my perspective, if there's a company like DeepSeek around now, or a model like DeepSeek R1 that's um, drastically bringing down the cost of compute for AI. That enables new use cases that previously weren't great because maybe humans could do it more like in a cheaper way,
Yeah.
or you know, or people didn't really even bother taking on these use cases because it didn't make too much sense. But now, I think overall it's going to be good. It's going to be the best for the users of AI. Companies adopting AI,
Yep.
because over time, naturally, this is going to work its way through the system, and AI is going to get cheaper for companies. Barriers for adoption are going to drop. So I think it's a good thing.
Yeah. And to give a little context for the audience, if you're listening to this, DeepSeek is obviously high level. It's a Chinese startup. But they open sourced an AI model, and it's as good as ChatGPT o1 is what people are saying. But they did it for like, they're saying $6 million. Now, they couldn't have done that model if they hadn't had a training center set up and all of the data centers and all of that, which they're not counting as a 6 million. But they're saying that they trained this model, got it up and running on $6 million. In comparison, I think OpenAI is like 10 to 12 billion. And maybe XAI is the same. And so it's billions versus just 6 million. That's not as important as training, but what I'm reading online, and this is all breaking news, so I could be totally wrong on this by Wednesday. But what it seems is that the inference and the amount of usage of DeepSeek to be able to query it like ChatGPT and talk to it and then hit the APIs, they're able to do it locally, and you can run it on a MacBook Studio, a very, accessible piece of equipment to run it locally, and you can do it at a fraction of the cost. And so if you can use it cheaper, that's good for the user, like you're saying. And that's obviously going to, what I'm thinking this is like the Sputnik moment for AI, where the US was a clear leader in everything. And suddenly it's like, oh, the Russians got to space before we did. And now I think there's going to be a lot of red tape that gets cut down, and bureaucracy just goes to zero in the US to kind of say, at all costs, keep up or stay ahead of China in AI, which is great for the consumer of AI. We're going to have all kinds of options at a fraction of the cost. You won't need to pay $200 a month for ChatGPT o1 Pro. It'll basically be, and maybe that's not the right use case. Businesses, and that's what I wanted to talk to you about today, will be able to access AI without the cost involved of the usage, like you were talking about with those, big documents. But if we go, so that's high level, that's for the audience's use case. But going back to like somebody like Levity, you guys are an automation platform. Are you an agent building platform, or is it automation? How do you differ from companies like Happy Robot and Vuma and the like?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, whether you call it agents or automations, from my point of view, sometimes pretty much overlaps. I think in the
Mhm.
end, it's about the outcomes, and it's about like how do you get to those outcomes and how rigid is the way of getting to these outcomes.
Yep.
Um, what we do is we help logistics companies automate email-based processes end to end. What that means is an email comes in. Usually, you have a human sitting there in the office reading the email, trying to figure out what it's about, reading it, seeing, hey, this is a quote request coming in from a shipper, for example,
Yeah.
and then executing the whole process that basically gets them to the point where they win the shipment, meaning they figure out the right price, they respond that back to the shipper. Maybe they have to negotiate with the shipper over email. Maybe the shipper confirms at some point they have to put it into the system. So all those sort of automations that happen between the shipper and the broker, or sometimes the forwarder, um, that go back and forth via email, all that can be automated. And yeah, you can call it, agents or agentic in that sense, because you give it, like a framework to operate within the AI. But of course, you can't hard code what it exactly will say or, suggest in all the situations. You just can give it like a, let's say, a floor and a cap, or like certain guidelines or, guardrails to operate within, and then you let it do its thing.
So would you say that, excuse me. So would you say that you guys, or I guess maybe not would you say, but what do you guys do at Levity? Do you have your own LLM, or do you plug into GPT, or maybe you could plug into DeepSeek? Like, how do you What model do you use and how do you keep up with that? Can you bring me behind the curtain of that a little?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we're not any different from anyone else in the space, I think, in that regard. I mean, we're not a foundational model builder. We're not a research
Okay.
studio. We're basically taking the best in breed models out there,
Nice.
fine tuning them on the tasks at hand and figuring out what are the best models to use at any given point in time. Meaning, if a model like DeepSeek R1 gets released, and obviously, we've we've noticed that it was hard to miss. Our engineers are in that sense already trying it out and trying to see, okay, how does it benchmark on the kind of tasks that we have to perform for our
Yeah.
customers, and in that sense also, like, what difference does it make from an economical perspective, and are there any new use cases we can maybe now offer, or things where we can bring the price down and offer them in a cheaper way to our customers, so that our customers in the end reap the benefits of that, and our customers get the, like, let's say, most powerful models under the hood without having to have a Stanford PhD on their team, who constantly monitors whatever is going on in the AI world and trying that out, so to say.
Yeah, I think it's a whole new frontier. I don't know if there's a real equivalent in business to this type of model where, I mean, if I look at it, and maybe I'm mischaracterizing this, but when I think of Levity, I think of, hey, you're enabling logistics companies to use AI for their businesses. It's inaccessible for them. It's really hard to just go to ChatGPT and get that to actually work for your business. It doesn't have a memory that it can learn. It's not enterprise. And even though they're rolling out Operator and these other things, it's not custom to your business and your workflows. And so no matter how powerful AI is, if you can't get a UI built and an automation and a workflow to be able to teach it, it's useless to logistics companies except for to say, hey, what's a truckload? I mean, it can define things, it can write stuff, but if you guys are doing that and then you just keep up the best model, then you never have to, like, let's say Rocket's using somebody like Levity. I never have to be like, hey, what's the next model that we need to train this on? And I think over the past 2 years, that thinking has evolved because I think large enterprises, well, I know large enterprises were like, hey, we're going to train our own model.
Yeah,
But then they're using Chat GPT 3 or whatever it was back then. But it's evolving so quickly that
yeah.
it's like, oh, we trained our full model and now we don't have any capabilities that O1 or O3 or Grok or XAI and all that has. You guys are saying, hey, we're going to do all that work. Just plug into us and automate your business, and it'll only get better over time, as assuming the scaling laws apply.
100%. I mean, 100%. Like, the one piece is also another piece is integrations. So, like, the industry is running on like a very fragmented landscape of TMS systems and other
Mhm.
like tooling categories. Sometimes they are a bit more open with their integrations and they have openly available APIs, but that can
Yeah.
also be very different, and it can require, let's say, partnerships that you have to work on for a month to get even access to their systems. So,
A month? How about like 6 months? I won't name names, but anybody who does EDI knows that it
yeah,
takes forever and it takes all of your money to do an EDI connection with a truckload shipper to get tenders and to get dispatch. And you got to pay a third party to integrate on one side and pay somebody else to do it on the other. And all it is transferring a 214 or a 210. And it's like, oh, now we're integrating, we can go live. But I do think that API displaced EDI in a way, but EDI stayed, and some of these legacy companies just stayed. I think that AI will replace API faster than API replaced EDI. I think that, like, if I'm going to market as a brokerage and I need to integrate into NetSuite or I need to integrate into SAP, sure, they have APIs and we have an API. But it's a lot of work in between to get the custom fields and all the mapping. But if you could train a workflow to say, go into this system, click this button, get this reference, and bring it back into my TMS, that's better than an API integration. And it used to be an RPA, but now it's an agent that can, I guess, maybe not think, but infer what would be the best next step. And you can train it and correct it, and then it's better. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I do think that that's part of how AI is going to displace companies.
mm.
Now, you guys don't do voice right now. You guys are focusing on email. Do you anticipate needing to do voice? Are you going to stay in the email and automation lane? What's your plans there?
Yeah, I mean, we do voice. It's not our, let's say, primary focus, because we're really focused on email-based workflows. But that being said, I was touching on like the end-to-end need earlier on in the
Hmm.
conversation, like automating workflows really end-to-end. And that can also mean, for example, that you get an email where, let's say, a shipper requires a track and trace update on a shipment. And let's say the latest update that you have in the TMS is 5 hours old. And, you know, let's say especially in the like area of time critical shipments, you might not want to report back like the status that's 5 hours old on that shipment.
Yeah.
So instead of basically saying like, hey, look, we're creating a task for a human in the TMS so that they get a more recent update, we could also place a phone call with the carrier and basically, have an AI call them and introduce themselves as like, hey, I'm Gero's AI. I'm inquiring on the shipment 12345. Where are you at right now? What's your current ETA? And has there anything been like, has there anything happened that is noteworthy to report? And so we're doing that already today. We're not being that loud about it yet, but in that sense, voice AI and phone AI is definitely here to stay. And we see that with our customers, and we see that in the market. And the way we think that about that is like being in close conjunction with email as well,
Okay.
basically.
I'm going to pivot here a little bit. Take me back to you co-founded Levity. You have a co-founder. How did you guys figure out that this was a good idea? Did you start in logistics? Did you start in AI and find logistics and figure out
Mhm.
a good use case? Take me through that.
Yeah, so I mean, my co-founder and I, we started Levity in 2019, pretty much.
That's early for AI. Like people don't
That's
even think about it before COVID, everybody. And now this episode won't air because I said COVID. No, I'm just kidding. But so before COVID, you had started it.
Yeah, exactly. Before COVID, we started it. We actually started building our team, during COVID. So I think we hired the first two people to our team just a month before COVID hit. And back then, it was much more like, let's say, horizontal and open-ended in the sense that we were aware of logistics, but we didn't build Levity with the intention of like building it solely for logistics.
Hmm.
Our observation was more like, hey, AI can address a lot of inefficiencies across industries. Companies are operating way, way, way too manually and not in a way how they should be. Humans are taking on way too many repetitive tasks that they shouldn't really waste their brain power on, like sorting files, tagging, like system entries, things like these. And we realized AI could really be a game changer there, but it was way too inaccessible. And so we started addressing that by building a platform that made it simple for companies to train their own AI models. And over time, we realized we got really good at email based workflows. And with my background in logistics through working at Forto, like the European Flexport, we just saw, okay, there's a massive need in logistics. We talked to, a bunch of companies in our network, and we decided to like really go all in and fully focus on logistics.
Yeah. And I asked that question to kind of set up the next series of questions, but you started a company before COVID, 2019, you started AI and you had like a North Star, which was automating processes for businesses. Let's say
Yeah,
that's like the name of it, right?
sure.
And then I think that every founder who is successful in the end is able to pivot. And people always think of that as like a negative term, pivot. Oh, yeah, you changed your mind, you failed, you pivoted. But I always look at it as like if you're still going towards automating processes for end to end in business, and then you find a niche in logistics and you say, hey, actually, email in logistics is it. And you start honing in on that, that seems to be the best, in my opinion. This is just an opinion. The best businesses take that route. They set out to solve a problem, but they're doing it with real customers. They hire slowly, they figure out market fit, and then they go attack it. And I think that you've probably seen there's other of your competitors, and I won't name names because I don't know anybody in the space really, but I'd like to get to know all of you guys and all of these AI companies. But they're newer and they started in logistics, but they went and, said, here's the idea. We're going to revolutionize something, raise some money, and go crush it. I do think you guys have a distinct advantage probably because you've been doing it longer and you have a little bit more of a foundation and you can kind of say, hey, we have a use case here, and you could expand to voice, but you have a use case, you're sticking to it, you're doing well with it. How do you go about making decisions on what type of product to add next? Because I can imagine in AI, I get shiny object syndrome all the time, and I'm just a freight brokerage TMS guy. And I'm like, oh, I could build final mile or parcel and all these cool things.
Sure.
And you're in AI, you could do whatever you want. So how do you go about staying controlled and saying, hey, here's where we're focusing?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think shiny object syndrome is definitely real. And everyone from, freight brokers to people in the tech world, broadly building SaaS companies to people in AI, they all need to be careful not to kind of take on too much on their plate, right? So I think the way I think about this is the one thing, having been in this game like for quite a while with my co-founder, we know each other very closely. We trust each other. We've gone
Mhm.
both through good times and not so good times together. And I think there's nothing that can replace that in a sense. So all the like experiences, all the knowledge, all the kind of trial and error that we have gone through, in a sense, all that is quite valuable. The second aspect, that you've touched upon is basically like how do you make sure to build the right thing, right, or to focus on the right things. And I think that's something where I believe we need to learn from our customers, similar to how we learned from our customers in the past, getting to the point where we're at right now. So one element of that is not just doing what your customers tell you to do, but rather listening like what's underneath or what's behind their ask. There's this famous quote that's often attributed to Henry Ford. I don't know whether he actually said it, but like, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. Then he went and built the car, right? Um, so
Yeah. Uh,
that
I've
kind of
never I've heard that, but not in the context, and now it makes a lot of sense. It's very difficult, and it almost is contradictory to how I think of building business. Is that I always just go off of the customer feedback, understanding what their actual needs are, and only build something that would be useful for them instead of building something that the market doesn't have, and I'm going to go revolutionize. But faster horses would have been the pick then. And so sometimes, especially in AI, and I have to be careful to not put my experience into building a business into yours because there are two separate things. One is brokerage, and it's like there's been a lot of track record and people who've made mistakes, and I can just not make the same ones. It's pretty easy. But AI, I mean, one, you're almost in 6 years in owning an AI company. I didn't know AI existed in 2019. And I know that obviously I have done my research and I love AI, so I research it all the time. And I know that it was like, Elon Musk and Sam Altman and all the stuff back in the day. But to the general consumer, ChatGPT is when AI was invented,
sure.
right? So that's 2023. No, yeah, 2023,
Uh,
October-ish, I think. Maybe that was 22.
yeah, it was. I think it was. ChatGPT must have launched around I think January 2023. So
Yeah. So like that winter,
yeah,
2022 to
yeah,
2023,
yeah.
that winter. And then it was like, oh, now we can interact with AI and now AI exists. It existed long before. But if I stay on point here and I say 6 years in, you've done a ton of maneuvering if you've run a business for 6 years. You've gone through burn rate, profitability, how to get to revenue, how to hire people, how to fire people, all of those things. I think that gives you an advantage. But the disadvantage is that how do you know what's next when DeepSeek just goes and disrupts the entire industry overnight and Nvidia has a sell off? Like that's got to be a lot. Talk to me. So Tilo is your co-founder, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
I maybe mispronounced that. That's my bad.
No, no,
But
no,
where
that's right.
are you guys originally like buddies from back in the day, or how did you start a business with him?
Yeah, we studied together at university. Tilo was always a bit more technical than I was, and he basically started as a self-taught engineer. He taught himself back then all the like programming language we required to build a first product and prototype. He like went deep down the AI rabbit hole, way before it was cool, like reading all the machine learning papers back then, figuring out like, how do I actually, get this like, model to do what I wanted to on my data. And, so in that sense, couldn't have done it without him. And the two of us, we built a first prototype, built a first product, and found our first customers, found our first investors, And here we are a few years later.
That's crazy. And for the record, you said maybe before it was cool. Definitely before it was cool. Maybe in your community and you guys were all talking AI, but the general public had no idea. So that's super cool. You're like early in that. So you went talk me through investing and funding and how you went about getting your first customer or investor and which order you did that in. Walk me through that.
Yeah, we got our first couple of customers. The first year, the two of us were just working from our like kind of living room table. We had a shared flat back then, and we were just kind of on a ramen diet, so to say, bootstrapping the company for the first year. And then after a year, we had a few customers already. We had raised a little bit of angel money after like close to a year of being, working on this. And then, pretty soon after our first angel round, we had some interest from investors. We raised our first pre-seed round from a really great group of investors. And then afterwards started building the team. COVID hit, we kept building. We raised our seed round in 2022. And then, ever since we've been, operating in a very lean way. Luckily, when it happened with our last round, we raised at a very good time in the markets before, startup funding dried up and the markets went all downhill. We've been very efficient ever since with the money that we raised. So in that sense, it seems like we won't have to raise money ever again unless we really need to or want to.
Wow. I rarely hear that. So congratulations on that. And I hope that works out. I mean, the best ability for a business is to not have to raise money. And then
Exactly.
even if you raise money, if you don't have to, it's a huge advantage to be able to, but not need it. And if, I mean, you're like the opposite story of Convoy then, because if, and probably Project 44, I'm saying that a little out loud, but I mean, anybody who raised money in 2022 at a crazy ZERP valuation and then needed to raise again is not able to. And so if you're in a position that you don't have to raise, you were efficient with it, and then you're in AI, so you always could if you wanted, because AI has got a lot of eyeballs right now. And probably AI and logistics is just the start. Like, I don't think people have even really thrown much money into that. So there's probably a lot of people who want to. But how do you look at building out a team when you started bootstrapped, you got some angels, you got your pre-seed and your seed, you have your path to profitability, all those buzzwords. But how do you look at building a team? When do you hire? Do you hire ahead of growth? Do you hire when you basically like, oh, now we can't handle it, the team is bursting at the seams, now I need to add one or two people? What's your strategy on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's different strategies, right? Like right now, I would say we hire whenever we have a burning need
Yeah.
to bring on someone else to the team. And usually, the way that burning need manifests is that either my co-founder's calendar or my calendar gets filled to the top with meetings or with tasks that pile up in some area of the business, and we're like, okay, we really need to get some help here, right?
Yeah.
So luckily, the two of us, we have very versatile skill sets that cover a lot of different areas, from engineering to product to design to sales to marketing. So I think that's a great thing that we basically cover all the areas that a business needs to cover between the two of us, meaning one of us can always like figure out something that needs to get figured out across the business. And then of course, if we realize, hey, look, if this is taking like at least half my week already, then probably it's going to be a good idea to bring on someone to take this off my plate so that I can figure out what's the next area that I can kind of apply the highest amount of leverage to with my time. And so that's how we usually, tackle it.
And so it sounds like Tilo is more technical, but you're also a technical founder. So you can code, you can do some of the engineering design. At least you're
Yeah,
dangerous enough with it.
yeah. I mean, I would say more than on the coding side. I'm quite good on the like design and product side of things. So like, how does a good product look like? What kind of UX, does the user require? How can we think about a good user journey and experience for, this new product or automation workflow we want to build? How can we fit this into our, like, let's say, outgoing phone calls? Like if there's an outgoing phone call we want to place through AI, what are the technical requirements? just from an engineering perspective,
Mhm.
but also how do we put that into our product without creating like sort of a Frankenstein of a product where suddenly it gets so complex for everyone to figure out how to do it that it becomes unusable. So in that sense, I think he's more on the really technical side of things when it comes to product
Yeah.
building. I'm more on the like UX, UI, and design side, but we're both generalists, I would say.
Yeah, the reason I ask it is that it sounds to me through these questions that you're running it almost like you're bootstrapped. You're like, hey, as much as me and my co-founder can do, and as few people as we need to hire is the best business strategy. And I think that if you'd answered that a different way, I probably would have been like, well, sounds like you're going to raise a Series A and then go through like a burn rate and how many days till zero, and then raise another round and then eventually exit, which is probably the goal is to exit. That's a lot of founders' goal. But the way you're building it, in my opinion, it matches the market, right? So that matches what my experience is in the market. And if I don't see anybody on LinkedIn in 2025 talking about hiring as many people as they can, but I do remember 2021 and 22 and into 2023, like the biggest name people on LinkedIn were recruiters. It was like the biggest fad was like we can recruit the best people, and everybody was just hiring everyone. And now that strategy has shifted so dramatically to, and I kind of said it in a negative connotation. Do you wait to hire until everything's bursting at the seams? But that's probably the best growth strategy for most companies right now.
Yeah,
Is
in the early days, that's the best approach.
yeah.
And if you really like, if you don't understand something deeply yourself, you can't expect anyone else to take it
How do you
on.
train
So,
someone on that? Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, I fundamentally believe that every company is differently, and there are a lot of people around who are really great at what they do. But like, for example, if you don't know how to sell your own product, even if you bring in the best salespeople, they probably won't be able to do that better than you, figuring out in the early days, how do you structure pricing, like what's your value
Yeah.
proposition, who's your ICP. Like if you don't have like at least a blueprint ready for that, that you can use to sell, um, it's going to be hard bringing on someone else. And the same applies to engineering, product, UX. If you haven't figured out like what you want to fundamentally build and what's out there that can help you build it, if you have 5 engineers sitting around, they won't really know what to work on, or they will just be running in circles while you try and figure it out. So in that sense, you know, starting yourself, figuring out the first couple of steps, making sure you're walking in the right direction, and then bringing on someone to kind of walk with you, or rather run with you.
Yeah.
That's usually the better approach. That's leading to less, let's say, backtracking and changing paths drastically. Maybe smaller pivots, but not having to kind of change the course of action drastically.
Yeah. Two things on that. One, in my own experience, you said something. You said, if you're not that good at selling your product yourself, the next, whoever you hire isn't going to be as good as you, even. And so I look at it that way too. Rocket has been successful despite or in spite of my sales ability to be able to teach sellers. But I set a very high bar. I was founder led sales. I still do sales. And because that's, I don't code. I know how to do all the API workflows and stuff, but I'm not technical, so I should go get customers. And Troy is very technical, so he's going to make sure they're integrated. But I everybody that you hire, it should just be, like a statement. They're going to be an order of magnitude worse than you. But if you start out and you can't even sell it or understand it, and then you try to sell it, the dilution is going to be too much. And I think that the second part of that would be, if you're going to market and you're trying to add sales reps and marketing and customer success, and you're hiring and hiring to fit every need that you're going to need, every need you're going to have, and then you need to pivot and go after a different product line, or you need to go for revenue in a different way. It's so hard to convince 20 people to pivot. It's a lot easier to convince 7 people and get them all on board and say, hey, we're actually going to charge at this thing now. And I think that's like the biggest mistake I made early, was this hired too many people. And then I had to convince too many people that this is the direction we were going to head. And it led to a little bit more slow growth and pain than it needed to. Now, that was 2023. 2025 is looking a lot better. And we have, I think, 2 more people than 2023. And we're doing a lot more revenue. So revenue per head is what I'm watching now and saying, hey, not only is it better to be more profitable and more efficient, But if you need to change direction or slightly pivot or bring in new tech, it's so hard to get 35 people to be on board with Asana or Salesforce instead of HubSpot. 7 or 10, 3 sales reps, like that's so much easier and you're just nimble. And in this market, if you're nimble, you win because AI is going to do the rest. That's my thing. So I'm gonna follow that up now. Here's a good one. The industry's talking about it. I think Happy Robot did a demo with What the Truck, and then everybody started chattering on LinkedIn like, "Oh, AI is going to replace all carrier sales reps. AI is going to replace all of this." And then there was the whole crowd of like, "AI is useless." So you got two camps. Obviously, I know where you land, but take me through how you approach an industry as ancient and as old-fashioned as logistics, and you try to bring AI to them when they're still using EDI. What's your strategy, and how do you walk through that?
I mean, as always, I think the truth lies somewhere in the middle. So AI is definitely not useless. Otherwise, what I do would have no reason of existence.
Mhm.
On the other side, AI will also not replace everything that humans are doing. I think in reality, it will change the work for the humans, working in like mostly knowledge work and desk jobs, right?
Yeah.
Humans will have to adjust, humans will have to learn. I think essentially the belief that I have is that it will lead to a much better working culture and working world because, to be honest, the kind of tasks that AI is doing, no one really likes doing them, right? Like, do you like copy pasting data from emails into systems? Do you like writing the same kind of email response 300 times a day? Do you like, as a, I don't know, freight broker, like penetrating your carriers and asking once an hour on the same shipment for the same update just because maybe you want to always have very accurate updates in your
Right.
TMS? Like, I doubt anyone really likes doing that kind of work. Maybe there's a few like, that love pain, but most people wouldn't really enjoy that kind of task. So I think essentially, in the end, the truth lies in the middle. But like with regards to the second element of the question, right? I think AI, in that sense, holds a lot of potential for automation online. I think phone, email, those are the areas that will probably have the biggest impact. And logistics as an industry has a lot of like text and phone conversations, right? So it's kind of a little bit unintuitive, but the fact that logistics has been running in like a more maybe ancient way, to kind of use your term here,
Yeah.
compared to other industries in the past decades, actually means there's a lot more areas where there's unstructured data, and there's a lot more areas where you can apply AI. If you think about, like, let's say booking your holiday, like you go to booking.com or Airbnb or Expedia or wherever you book, there's kind of automated systems talking to one another all the way, right? Like, you go to booking.com, you can book your hotel with 2 clicks, and the hotel will know when you'll be arriving, which room you have. You can see the rate right away on the website. Like, there's almost no room for AI to really come in and automate stuff. At least, the areas where AI can have an impact, they've already been utilized, like maybe dynamic
Mhm.
pricing, like when you book a flight,
Support,
prices change, yeah,
chat, things like that. Yeah.
support chat, but that's not something radically new. But in that sense, like in, travel bookings, there's no phone calls being placed, right, to people manually, at least not in a transactional way. Like, the industry doesn't transact via phone. In logistics, phone, email, that's very different. And so I think
Especially truckload logistics,
truckload
drayage.
logistics,
Yeah, there's a
yeah,
lot of phone calls.
exactly. So I think in that sense, in a kind of unintuitive way, the whole industry lends itself to being like a fantastic fit for AI and new technologies.
Yeah. So I'm gonna pivot and I'm gonna come back to LTL and how I think LTL and truckload differ with AI and some of the applications. But several times you've said human instead of human, and you've said holiday instead of vacation. So I just got to clear this up. Where are you originally from, and what's the accent? Which country?
It's a bit hard to place, right?
Yeah, you sound like Elon Musk to me. That's what I think. But I mean, maybe it's because you're talking AI and it's a similar accent. But you said European Flexport, but I don't know if it's European. I mean, it's pretty broad. So
So
where is
I'm
it?
so I'm not from South Africa.
No, but you do sound like Elon. Whoever's listening to this in the comments, tell me I'm not crazy. And even just saying I'm not from South Africa, it sounded like Elon saying it. So where are you from?
Okay, all right. Well, I'll take it. I'm from Germany.
Germany. Okay. And
Germany.
where
Yeah.
in Germany?
Born and raised in Frankfurt, and I've been living in Berlin for the past couple of years. Nowadays, I'm spending a lot of time in the US because 90% of our customers are here. I also studied in the US, at university in St. Louis, so Midwest, Missouri. That's been a great time. But yeah,
Missouri.
I think
Nice.
I think over the years, like my accent kind of grew to a place where it's a little bit hard to place.
Yeah, I mean, now that you say German, I can hear it, but it isn't like distinctly German to me. Now, I'm from Fargo, North Dakota, so like I have almost no diversity in accents around me. It's all just yeah, you betcha. Oh, you need a hot dish, those types of things. But you're out of Chicago right now, and the reason I ask is because I like to on this show on the Let's Talk Logistics podcast, I like to have the audience get to know who you are because humans build businesses, not anything else. And so I like to understand why you built it and what you're going to do next, but also how you're juggling it all. Do you have any kids? What's your life look like?
No kids yet. I have a girlfriend. I have a lot of good friends. I have my family, my parents mostly, but no kids yet. So in that sense, the only reason why I'm getting sick is a lot of travel.
That'll do
Not,
it to you as well.
yeah, 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 but not someone bringing it home from daycare.
Okay. And how old are you? You're in your late 20s, early 30s?
Yeah, I'm 29.
Okay, that was a pretty good guess. And for the record audience, I had no idea, but I put that on there. Besides, so you got a girlfriend, you travel a lot, you're from Germany, you live in Chicago. What part of Chicago do you live in?
West Loop.
Okay, not bad. Why'd you choose Chicago? Is it just because it was a freight capital for
Yeah,
those? Besides Craig Fuller saying it's Chattanooga, it is Chicago. I think we all know that.
yeah, no shade on Chattanooga. It's a great place too. But yeah, I picked Chicago because I think it's the place to be when it comes to getting in touch with logistics companies. It's the freight capital of the U.S. And I wanted to be as close as possible to our customers.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then you don't even have to like commiserate the Chicago Bears because you're not from there, so you can just cherry pick. Are you a Chiefs fan then? Because I heard Missouri in there.
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of pick whoever I want, honestly.
Bandwagon the Chiefs, I would too. I hate them right now, but I think that's most of America. It's like one
Yeah,
of
I
those
mean,
maps, like every state except for Kansas and Missouri probably are rooting for the Eagles, but
yeah.
everybody hates the Eagles, so it's going to break down a little differently. We'll see. So I was talking sports. Are you a soccer guy being from Germany over football, although you might call it football?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, we call it football, right? We don't call it soccer. I used to watch a lot back in the days. Now, not that much anymore. I watch like World Cups, Champions League finals, this sort of
Yeah.
stuff. But other than that, I mean, I don't watch that much sports. I rather enjoy doing it myself. So
So you do have an athletic background? Did you play in high school? And
a bit, yeah. I mean, I used to play football. I used to do martial arts for a long time, so taekwondo, MMA. So this
a
sort
little
of stuff.
MMA in there, huh?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
awesome. I like to hear
exactly.
it. So I ask you these questions because it does go into how you run a company and how you see, hiring and firing can be merit based. And I think almost everybody from a athletic background or from a competitive background uses merit based for everything because that's just their worldview. And
Sure.
anybody who didn't play those sports in high school or college might take a different angle on like, hey, we'll hire because we have this need and anybody can do it. So how do you go about like maybe I'll just ask you some tough questions. What's the hardest decision you've had to make as far as firing somebody and why did it happen?
A couple of years ago, we had to let several people go on the team because we had made a change in strategy back then, and we had hired before we had validated the direction we were
Learned that
going.
lesson. Okay.
So yeah, it was a mistake that I made and that my co-founder made. We did it together, so to say. And I mean, of course, the people that were affected, it was the hardest for them other than for us. But also, if you realize, okay, I made a mistake here and I need to kind of change things, it's never fun. So in that sense, I think that also really changed the way we thought about hiring and bringing on new people. And I think in general, like with, let's say, the athletic background or like that sort of stuff, I think if you're in a football team or if you're, you know, MMA is a bit different because it's like not a team sport.
Yeah.
But even there, like you get feedback very quickly, right? Like if
Yeah,
you get
very quickly.
if yeah, if you get punched in the face or if someone takes you down, that's very hard feedback that,
You made a
like
mistake.
you need to improve something. Like you need to improve your stance, you need to improve your takedown defense, you need to improve your, defense for the punches. Whatever it is, right? Like it's in a way direct market feedback in the toughest way possible. Like you get literally punched in the face if you're not careful. And I think nowadays some people are a bit too, let's say, sensitive when it comes to giving or receiving feedback. Like,
Oh, yeah.
I can really like you or even love you at the same time, but also tell you like, hey, look, that wasn't good enough, or that's not great, or we need to do better here. And it's not meant like, sometimes in the American culture, it's a little bit like, oh yeah, that's awesome. If we could just do a little bit more. But what you want to say is like, hey, look, this is complete garbage, and we need to redo it.
Yeah.
But I don't approach it like that. So I just say like, hey, look, this is not good enough.
Yeah, radical candor, it sounds like you
Yeah,
use, which one I'm gonna unpack. So one, I think that the reason I asked that is because I could hear it when you're talking about like how many people you hire and how you go to market, like that you'd been through a little bit of a, hey, we've learned from this, not because somebody else made a mistake, but because we made a mistake. And I know
exactly.
that,
And it was like the 2021, 2022 times, exactly the times that you mentioned, right? Like when
yeah,
also, the times were a bit different. Everyone was kind of expecting the kind of, growth times to continue like forever and let the good times
or at least
roll. And
long
let's
enough.
let's let's hire ahead of our needs, and let's just build teams before we really know that we're going to need them, and so like different times.
Yeah, I think that going through something like that though does make you a better business owner. Also, you kind of said something that resonated. You said it was my co-founder's mistake, but it affected somebody else more. And it
Sure.
does come off as like, I know people might think it's disingenuous to say like it's really hard on the founder to have to fire somebody because he's not the one being fired. But if you take the psychology of it, like your mistake goes and affects somebody else, you can think about that not from a business lens. If you accidentally run a red light and hit somebody, or if you accidentally stop too quickly on ice and somebody crashes, it's your fault. You have this, like, you carry that. And so I know that not everybody wants to hear that founders have to carry that because founders in the media are all rich and they all exit with millions of dollars. But it is something that you have to carry, but it makes you a better business owner. And you obviously, only if you take the feedback and apply something different the next time, try not to make the same mistake twice. So I think that's interesting. You went through that. As far as, how you see the markets, I'm going to pivot back to, LTL truckload. You went into logistics. I think truckload obviously is where everybody's looking. But what is your take on the LTL and the TMS landscape with Levity? Like, what's your plans there, and what do you see for opportunities?
I mean, I think overall we're fairly, let's say, agnostic, as long as there's a system landscape that supports us.
Hmm.
So, what do I mean by that? If you look, for example, at truckload FTL, right? We're partnered with Green Screens. They're a great partner for us when it comes to getting real time rates that are quotable on shipments, which is a critical component in this whole automation piece, right? Because we can't automate a quoting workflow end to end if we don't have an API that we can shoot data to that gets us a rate back that we can use to generate an email back to the shipper, sending them basically, a quote based
Yep.
on their request. So in the LTL space, for example, there's companies forming that tackle similar things. Earlier this year, I met with someone from a company called Pallet. They're
I've heard
basically
that name. I don't know who they are, but I've heard the name.
Yeah, they're basically working on like a kind of green screens for LTL sort of product. And in that sense, I would say we are fairly agnostic when it comes to air freight, sea freight, road freight, LTL, FTL,
Yeah.
as
Automate the
long
workflow.
yeah, as long as there's systems that we can tap into via API or via direct integration we already have, that's good enough for us. And the rest, I mean, our product is not verticalized to one use case. I
Hmm.
consider our product to be more like a set of Lego blocks that you can mix and match and put together in different permutations and combinations to
Yep.
achieve different outcomes. That's why for us, if someone comes to us and that person is like I don't know, air freight forwarder, and previously we had only sold to freight brokerages to do FTL road freight, I don't have to tell that person like, oh yeah, sorry, we don't have an air freight product right now, right?
Yeah.
I can just tell that person like, hey, look, come in, we have an email integration. If you tell me your system that you need to call has an API endpoint that we can shoot to, we can build all the logic together with the Levity platform. We can send the data where it's supposed to go, and that's done.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, that's exactly what we did, right? We have customers who are like FTL road freight. We have customers that are LTL road freight. We have air freight forwarders, international 3PLs, sea freight forwarders. We have even some, companies doing rail freight. So in that sense, we draw no borders, and there's like in that sense nothing we can't do as long as there's automated systems, or like as long as there's systems with API endpoints.
Yeah. So you just need what's your system of record? We can plug into it and we can take your emails and make those actions that your team is doing to go into the TMS or into a quoting system, get a rate, email them back. We can automate that. I do think that LTL might be a little bit like your booking.com example on the front end because there is a
Mhm.
lot of Project 44 and Banyans and things that aggregate rates and now pallet. But
Sure.
on the back end, I think that people don't realize how many check calls go into LTL. Like a
Mhm.
truckload, you got to call and get location, do your check calls. A nice sized truckload brokerage is moving 100 loads a day, like a pretty large truckload brokerage for what I would consider mid market. But a small LTL broker is moving 100 to 300 loads a day, and a mid size is moving 500 to 1,000 loads a day. And
Yeah.
the APIs are supposed to do everything. But in LTL, there's this weird thing where 20% of the time I'll shoot low. The pickup doesn't get made. There is no pro number. There's a pre-pro, but it's not picked up. You have to contact the vendor. You have to contact the carrier and reschedule them. And that's all phone calls and emails all day
Yeah.
long.
Yeah.
And I mean, Rocket does well over 500 shipments a day in our TMS, and 20% of them get missed. And we've got a bunch of people that call every LTL carrier and we say, hey, we got like 13 shipments. And that, like, the reason I bring it up is that I used to do it before when I started Rocket. It was me and a couple of buddies and I did all the ops and I hired an operator. His name's Brandon, and me and Brandon did all the missed pickups. And so I memorized T-Force Freights and FedEx's and ABF's dial tree. And I knew which hit one for FedEx to get somebody local or three. T-Force Freight, you got to go five for ground freight operations. Like there's all kinds of different buttons to click. But there's a lot of that. That's just one example that can be automated. But if I try to pull that back to, and I'm going to bring it up again, AI replacing freight reps. I think that my strategy is that I'm not going to replace anybody on my team with AI, but I might hire 50% fewer people to grow 100% revenue over the next 3 years. And people are like, well, is that a bad thing? I mean, for a business owner, it's a great thing. But I actually think it's better. And I'm going to go back to my analogy earlier. It's easier to pivot when you have 7 or 10 people and get them on the same page. It's also
Yeah.
easier to take care of all your people when you don't have so many.
Sure.
And like, you think of a corporate bloat. That's the whole reason people hate corporations is because there's mid-level management who has a senior manager who has a VP, and then it ends up being like the director level tells the entry level what to do, and the entry level does all the work and never feels seen by their boss. I think that with companies like Levity, freight and logistics companies can grow to well over 100 million without mid-level management, without the whole corporate org chart and corporate bloat, because you don't need to have all those people in the middle. You just have individual contributors that are enabled by AI.
Hmm.
And I'll even go as far as say whoever doesn't use AI will lose and whoever uses it best will win and everybody else will be in the middle and like survive. But if you use it better, it's like a weapon. It's a sword. If
Yeah.
you use AI, if Rocket uses it better than my competitor over 2 years, and I implement faster and I have automated workflows, and on like the whole revenue side, there's AI as well. It's not replacing jobs. I'm just not hiring more people, and I'm doing twice the work or 10 times the work.
Hmm. Yeah, look, I mean, I talk to operations leaders at freight brokerages, forwarders, 3PLs almost every day. And I'm yet to meet the first person who tells me I want to use AI to, cut heads and, cut the team size and let people
Yep.
go. Every single one is interested in basically using AI to basically do more with the same amount of people on the team and basically, grow top line without having to grow headcount linearly. So they all want to grow more efficiently. They all want to keep team size stable and, doing more revenue with that.
Yep.
And I think, letting people go is always seen as like a, like method or tool of last resort. Like if you don't have to do it, it's never fun. Like
Yeah,
no
humans
one
hate doing it.
no
Most humans,
one,
not
no one.
everybody, but most humans hate firing people.
I wonder why that is.
Yeah,
Um,
imagine that. Like they like people and they form a relationship with them, things like that.
yeah, exactly. So, in that sense, I think from what I'm seeing in the market, everyone's thinking about it that way. Like
Yeah.
everyone wants to do more while keeping headcount stable, or just hiring a few additional people.
Mhm.
And I think what that might lead to down the line is like that. Let's say industries like logistics. Um, there will be less new people coming into these industries. Like if you're a fresh college graduate, if you're a fresh university graduate, whatever, there will be less entry level roles for people that are needed to just pick up the phone whenever it's ringing, or place a
Yeah.
phone call
Call
whenever something
centers, things like
happens,
that.
or that sort of stuff. But from what I'm hearing from companies, it's also really, really difficult to find people for these roles that are good and motivated and that actually want to do that. So
Yeah.
I think in the end, like the whole like industry of like entry level jobs and jobs that have to be performed by humans, I think it will not be an overnight change, but it will be a gradual change to like a slightly different kind of work world.
Yeah. I also think that it's not even hard to predict that however fast I think logistics companies will adopt this, add 4 years to it, and then that's how fast they'll actually adopt it. But the companies who
Yeah.
adopt it quickly, I like if Rocket implements this in the next year, we won't have a huge advantage this year. Maybe we'll have an advantage next year. But in 3 years, if we're fully implemented in AI workflow automation and we haven't added headcount, but we've grown revenue by 100% over 3 years, which is only 30% a year, totally doable, then you're looking at, oh, now there's a sizable difference between their profitability and the EBITDA and net income, which is all I care about. We're bootstrapped, is net income is going to be better than a similar size brokerage. And then the reason I brought that up is I don't think there will be as many. You're right. There's not going to be as many new entry level jobs, but the people who are in freight now that have experience and are good at their jobs just got a raise. Because if their company isn't giving them a raise, people like Rocket and others are going to be looking to hire one person who can be augmented by AI to be five people because they have all the freight expertise and they know exactly what to do. So high level carrier sales reps and carrier managers will be in skyrocketing demand because you only need one of them. You don't need one of them to run a team of 10 people. You need one of them to run a team of 1 and 10 AIs, and you can post 25 loads a day. And instead of one amazing carrier sales rep covering 10 loads a day, the AIs will cover as many loads as need to be covered. And that carrier sales manager from CH or wherever who they headhunted will help build the algorithm for pricing and contract lanes and source carriers and focus on revenue producing. That's going to be a huge difference.
Mm,
But the people who have those jobs are going to get more valuable
mm,
because they have the knowledge already.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, the way that I'm looking at AI in logistics, and pretty much AI in all the industries that are, operating in a similar fashion, is right now, whether you believe it or not, like AI is still pretty early. Like
Hmm.
we're still far from the point where every single company in the market, like adopted AI, and it's basically table stakes to use it. So the analogy that I use very often is, if you think of Clark Kent, Superman, right?
Hmm.
Clark Kent on planet Earth is Superman. And he's special. He can do so much more than other people can, right? But in that sense, right now, Earth is Earth, and other logistics companies adopting AI, they can become like a Clark Kent on planet Earth. But over time, if more and more and more and more and more people do that, and Earth becomes basically, Krypton, and everyone's Superman, then no one is Superman anymore, and everyone is just an ordinary guy. And if you're the last human on Krypton, who's like much weaker than everyone else, you're going to get crushed, right? So in a way, if you're the first guy or among the first guys adopting it, there's going to be outsized benefits and outsized abilities to basically, get market share and grow faster than the competition. If you're in the middle chunk of companies, then you're adopting it because it becomes table stakes and you would be losing otherwise. And if you're, one of the last people to adopt it, you might just as well close shop. So in that sense, right now, I believe companies adopting it, and we're going to see it this year massively. 2025 will be the year of like, AI becoming mainstream. So I think right now you still have the opportunity to adopt AI and be one of the supermans on
Mhm.
planet Earth. I think by the end of this year, we'll already be at the point where probably everyone will realize, oh damn, if I don't, start
Yeah.
using AI in 2026, then I'm going to get crushed.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I've never heard an analogy quite so well put in AI as far as like the Superman. And I was thinking you were going to go with kryptonite, but then I you took me to the Krypton and like, oh, everybody is Clark Kent there. Early movers have the advantage, and I really think that like not just for freight brokerages, but for even companies like Levity, I think that you could say the same thing to be true. So early movers on that side will reap the benefits of helping logistics companies early on because then everybody will do it and it'll drive your costs down, but you'll have a bigger customer base. So it's a dynamic both ways. It's going to be super interesting to see. So take me through two more things, and then we'll wrap this up. So one, how do you guys have you changed how you charge or how do you charge? Because I think that that's one of the biggest complexities of AI is like, of course I want to implement it. How much will it cost me? And I've seen like 10 different models, usage based to like, hey, pay me 25K a year and then pay me per AI agent. Where do you guys land? And not obviously not price, but how do you go about pricing?
Yeah, fundamentally, there's only one model in AI that really makes sense, which is usage based, because that's what the cost basis is tied to. And every other
Hmm.
model that you see out there tries to approximate usage in some other shape or form so that you kind of can get your margins that you need. But the only way that really makes sense at infinite scale basically is in a usage based way where like your cost is tied to every single AI action that happens. So for example, in our case, if we automate email based workflows for companies, every single time we respond to a quote request after having processed it, sent to systems, etc. Every
Yeah.
time we answer a quote request, or we answer a track and trace request, or we create a load in the system, or we pull a document from the TMS and send it back to the shipper if they request it. Every single time we do it, we kind of have to charge for it. So in that sense, there's a usage based model behind it. And similar with phone calls. I mean, with phone calls, per second or per minute of, phone call, you have to charge for it. And the good thing about it is usually you can compare, let's say, the human cost and the AI cost in that sense pretty well to each other, because you can calculate, if you have to build an ROI case, how many minutes does it take for a human to process a typical quote request. And if that's, for example, 5 minutes, and you have a base salary of 55,000 plus for 1K contributions, etc., you can easily calculate what the human minutes typically costs and how much the AI costs you, and you can kind of compare it, and you can see the ROI on the productivity gains. So in that sense, it's a model that is easily comparable to the current status quo, and easily understandable by everyone, and it's economically aligned with basically
Yeah.
also the cost of running an AI company.
Yeah, I think that now I'm getting pretty old. I'm 31 now, so you're too young to maybe remember this, but back in the day there was prepaid minutes for your cell phone and you'd
Yeah,
buy like a card and you'd get your minutes and I can think that that's an analogy to using AI voice. You're going to pay by the minute rather than by like hey, they rescheduled this pickup or they did one action, but instead it's how many talking minutes, right? And you're looking at it that way, or seconds. So that's analogous. And maybe you actually do remember that because you are 29. So maybe you did have the time where you had to go to the Sprint store and buy more minutes, because that's what I had to do to talk to my girlfriend and tell my mom, shut down my phone at 10 p.m. every night because I was talking too much to my girlfriend. I don't want to unpack it. The audience doesn't need to know. If my mom's listening to this, I'm still a little salty about that, but it worked out. So you can have that pricing model, or what I think has happened in TMS and SaaS, right? Which is, sure, they know their cost of goods based off of usage, number of shipments. Almost every TMS is like, hey, it's $5 a shipment, it's $3 a shipment. Then people got real sophisticated and they said, it's $1,000 a month until you hit this many shipments. And then it's marginal from there, overage. And I think that I actually hate that pricing model over time, because it's like a progressive tax bracket. It's like, yeah, your taxes are 25% on anything over 150K, but between 125K and 150K, it's only 17%. And it's just too complex. So I like the usage based. And I think that, and I'm not pitching Levity, I'm pitching the idea of your guys' companies. I do like Levity, for the record. But if I'm looking at it as a business owner, I'm going, okay, is it equal or lesser cost than a full time employee? 401k, medical, and all of that, and wages. But then what's the error rate too? So let's say I could hire, maybe it's the same cost. It's actually less. But what if it was the same cost? What are the benefits still? Well, the AI doesn't make errors on, oh, I misquoted this. It should have been going on this lane and I typed it in this lane and now we need an appointment. I didn't get it right. That happens all the time in freight. One zip code wrong in Chicago and it's a different type of delivery. And so error rate, and then response time. I mean, that's all we do is try to get back to our customers faster. AI can't be beaten that, because it could have 500 emails come in and all 500 asynchronously. So it can handle all of them instead of doing one at a time, which is such a stark contrast in logistics. Because I mean, Rocket onboards customers monthly or weekly. I'll say monthly, at least two a month, that the only reason they came over to us is because one of our competitors would take 48 hours to get back to them or 24 hours to get back to them, and we can do it faster. And we don't have AI right now. So I'm going to lean into that. All right. Enough of my spiel. My last question, I ask everybody this question, and you maybe already talked about it, but maybe there's more. About, if you could go back and there was one mistake you made that you didn't have to make, and I don't mean things that were formative to your company and you needed to learn those, but something you made a mistake that was just kind of stupid. And it's like, well, if I could have just not done that, we'd still be here. We'd maybe be doing better. So that someone listening to this who's building a business can avoid that same mistake, what would it have been?
I mean, many things,
It's
probably.
hard.
Building a business over the course of several years, many things go differently from how you expected them to, or how you expect them to. But no, I think the one thing that I would do differently in hindsight is I would focus, vertically on logistics earlier. I think, back then, um, as we were a bit more horizontal starting out, it was very different figuring out what we actually need to build. If your first customer is in logistics and your second customer is in corporate travel and your third customer is in e-commerce and your fourth customer is somewhere else, and they all want different things, and I think, in that sense, that might be a bit more unique to a software company, but I think still specialization tends to breed faster growth. So even in logistics, for example, if you focus on doing one thing really well, like, hey,
Yeah.
we are the best FTL, truckload brokerage for Illinois, or, we are the very best at delivering like biotech and
Hmm.
medical components that need certain, cooling and transportation standards, and, something like that. I think in general, if you do a bit of everything, if you don't have a high enough degree of specialization, that usually means you're going to be okay at everything, but not excellent at something specific.
Yeah.
And so I think the way to go there is more like becoming excellent at one thing and then becoming excellent at a second thing, but not doing everything all at once in the beginning.
Yeah, I love it. And in logistics specifically, Rocket, I struggle with that same thing. I try to do truckload, and we do truckload, but I only do it for customers who just use us as, hey, we need you to handle this, not quote this contract lane and try to source carriers, because we're really good at delivering stuff to houses and doing LTL home delivery. But you were right in logistics. If you find your niche or specialization early, not only are you going to get better at that thing and create more sales differentiation between you and a competitor, but also you talked about full circle here. You talked about MMA and your feedback loop and getting punched in the face. You fix things, and your success loop is so much tighter when you're focusing on e-commerce and the unique needs of that versus we ship all modes everywhere. And I think TQL is probably the only company who's been successful that does everything for everyone at a marginal level. And they're still, one of the top 5 companies, but they're the exception. Everybody else is the rule. I mean, CH has their own specialty. Everybody knows it. They've got their certain things. They do everything, but they do some things so well that that's why people use them. And so I love that advice. I think that that's super useful for somebody. It's a theme, but you can actually put it down to like the exact, hey, specialize earlier and get really good at something. Riches in the niches is one way to say it, but I like the way you kind of put in a specialization there. So appreciate you joining. Where do people find you? Just LinkedIn, website? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, sure. LinkedIn, or on our website, levity.ai. Always happy to chat freight, always happy to chat AI and automation, always happy to learn about like the automation challenges that, you all are experiencing, to see where we can help, or at many of the freight conferences. So we're going to be at Manifest in Vegas. We're going to be at Air Cargo Conference in Dallas in March. We're going to be at TIA in San Antonio in April. So, hit us up there.
Well, I will see you at Manifest. We're also going to be there, just kind of walking the show. I have not announced that, but I will be there. And one thing, I guess, one last question for you: can I use meme coins and XRP to pay for your service? Are you guys accepting crypto at the moment? Because my meme coins have been going off. I mean, I could get a good value there.
Okay, we can take a look at your portfolio together.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. I'm going to hit end on the recording. Have a great day.
All right, awesome. Bye.